Good evening and welcome. I'm Mamta Rawat from the Corporate Communications team of CareEdge. I welcome you to our discussion today on Evolving ESG Landscape. Is Corporate India equipped? We sincerely appreciate your time in joining us for this webinar. We would like to welcome our esteemed guest speakers for today. Mr. Mukund Rajan, Chairperson at Ecube Investment Advisors and Environment Committee of FICCI. Mr. Prabodha Acharya, Chief Sustainability Officer at JSW Group. Mr. Manish Kumar, Head of ESG and CSR at ICICI Bank. The session will be moderated by Mr. Rohit Inamdar, CEO at CareEdge ESG Ratings. We will commence the session with a presentation by Ms. Hiba Sayed, Assistant Director at CareEdge Ratings. This will be followed by a panel discussion and a Q&A session. In case of queries, participants are requested to key in their panel. We will take up your queries at the end of the discussion. Now, may I invite Hiba to make the presentation.
Thank you, Mamta. Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to CareEdge ESG's webinar on Evolving ESG Landscape. Is Corporate India equipped? Prince Charles, during one of his speeches back in 2009, made a very profound statement, and when I read it, I couldn't help but share it with a wider audience today. He said the sustainability revolution will be the third major social and economic turning point in human history, following the Neolithic Revolution and the Industrial Revolution. I couldn't agree more on this. Sustainability is here to stay, and if it doesn't, then the human race may not be able to stay. We all, in various capacities of ESG practitioners, promoters, and enthusiasts, know the importance of ESG narrative in today's world. Now, let me quickly take you through some of the very well-known benefits of adopting ESG practices. Implementing ESG practices help companies stay ahead of the regulatory requirements, reducing the risk of legal issues and fines. Companies with strong ESG practices tend to have better reputation, which can lead to increased customer loyalty and brand value. Companies that adopt ESG practices often see improved financial performance, better risk management, increased operational efficiency, and stronger long-term growth prospects. ESG practices also contribute to positive social outcomes such as community development, diversity and inclusion, and the overall societal well-being. ESG-focused companies are increasingly attractive to investors who are looking for sustainable and ethical investment opportunities. This can often lead to better access to capital with lower cost. By focusing on sustainability, companies can reduce water, lower their energy consumption, and achieve significant cost savings, thereby giving them a competitive edge. Now, let me take you through the current ESG landscape in India. Mr. Modi in December 2023 launched an initiative called as LIFE, which stands for Lifestyle for Environment. Now, this was launched in collaboration with the UN Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres. This mission aligns with UN SDGs and calls for individual action as well as global collaboration to foster a sustainable future for the entire planet. India announced its Panchamrit goals at COP26, which basically outlines the 5 key commitments to combat climate change. These essentially are 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel energy, 50% energy from renewables, reduction in carbon emission by 1 billion ton, 45% reduction in the carbon intensity of the economy. Now, all of these are supposed to be attained by 2030. And the overarching nectar element is net zero for India by 2070. Now, one of the levers for achieving these goals is the green taxonomy. Now, according to us, the green taxonomy is a must-have for greening of the financial system and combating greenwashing. In 2022, the Ministry of Finance announced India's first sovereign green bonds framework to attract capital towards eligible green projects. In fact, in FY24, the government has raised almost 21,000 crore of SGBs, and the budgeted estimate for 26 is 25,000 crore. In April 2023, the RBI introduced a framework for banks and deposit-taking NBFCs to accept green deposits, which basically are interest-bearing deposits earmarked for funding the environmentally friendly projects. In 2023, the IFSCA also issued a framework for sustainable finance. Now, another innovation incentive announced by the GIFT City is the regulatory sandbox for sustainable finance. Now, this basically provides the fintech companies a secure environment to develop and test innovative sustainable finance solutions. In Feb 2024, the RBI announced a draft for banks and other regulated entities for making disclosures regarding climate-related risk. And most recently, in October 2024, the RBI announced the creation of a database known as Climate Risk Information System to bridge the gap in climate risk data availability, which is currently extremely fragmented and lacks standardization. The government is also toying the idea of creation of a national green financing institute, principally to aggregate green capital from various sources and reduce the cost of capital for climate-focused projects. Now, all of these are expected to accelerate India's transition to a low-carbon economy. The BRSR framework announced by SEBI is another harbinger towards standardized reporting and disclosure of non-financial information. This has led to an entire ecosystem of ESG-related services, right from assurance providers to consultants to ESG rating providers. The government has also set the ball rolling on hard-to-abate industries. In November 2024, the government announced its commitment to roll out a carbon credit trading scheme under two mechanisms: the compliance mechanism and the offset mechanism. In December 2024, the Government of India announced a taxonomy for green steel, India being the first nation to unveil such a taxonomy. Globally, there is no commonly accepted definition of green steel. The government has also introduced Green Credit Program, wherein green credits are awarded to activities like afforestation, sustainable agriculture, water management, etc. And all of these green credits can be traded on a domestic platform. The government has also announced the Green Skill Development Program in collaboration with the Ministry of Environment, primarily for developing green skills amongst the youth. The Indian government has also notified changes to the Ecomark scheme of 1991. Now, this scheme relates to labeling of eco-friendly products. The Bureau of Indian Standards, BIS, as we know it, has laid down a list of requirements for a product to be qualified under the Ecomark scheme. Now, these include many attributes like the safety of the product, the quality, environmental impact, etc. Now that we have seen the current ESG landscape in India and how it has evolved over the last couple of years, let me show you some analysis conducted by us on how this ESG drive is embedded in the boardrooms of Indian companies. So CareEdge ESG has conducted an analysis of roughly 100 companies spread across diversified sectors, right from heavy electricals to power, metals and mining, cables, banks, and NBFCs. So roughly 53% of the companies that we have analyzed, conduct an annual review of their performance against the BRSR principles, whereas roughly 35% of the companies conduct a annual review about their compliance against the BRSR principles. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum are a set of industry leaders who perform these reviews on a quarterly basis. Whereas there's another set of companies, roughly around 30 to 39%, who have not given any information about the review frequency. Around 36% of the companies that we have analyzed give information about the priority ESG issues that the companies have identified. In fact, they reported on a priority order for the stakeholders to understand what are the material issues. 35% of the companies that we have analyzed also report an ESG or a sustainability report other than a BRSR report. 23% of the companies in our data set have at least one board member or senior management member who has expertise on the environment or climate related aspects. Whereas 38% of the companies that we have analyzed have at least one board member or senior management having expertise on the social aspects. Now, this basically helps us understand that a significant gap exists on the leadership side on both environmental and social parameters. And this could kind of limit a company's ability to effectively address and integrate ESG concerns into their strategic decision making. Now, looking at the brighter side, around 88% of the companies that we have analyzed have already formed an ESG committee or a sustainability committee. Now, this can either be an exclusive ESG committee or a committee combined with some other committee, for example, CSR and ESG committee. 76 companies that we have analyzed provide training on BRSR principles to all their board members, whereas at the other end of the spectrum are around 7 companies who do not provide any such trainings to their board members. 73% of the companies have aligned their majority of their targets with the BRSR principles. Now, this analysis shows us that there are two sides of the story for corporate India, where a bunch of companies have already kickstarted their ESG journey by setting up an ESG committee, identifying material ESG issues, whereas at the other end are a bunch of companies who have not been doing any such initiatives. And now that we have seen this lacuna in implementing ESG, let us see what are the pathways to address this lacuna. Consider this as an ESG puzzle with four essential pieces. I would be taking you through each of them in detail. To begin with, we first need to understand what has gone well in India's journey in the past couple of years. We then need to understand what more is needed to achieve our national goals, what are the challenges in getting there, and how should we navigate those challenges. Now, let's look at the key drivers of ESG. There has been a considerable push from various regulators to not only adopt the best ESG practices, but also start disclosing the various metrics. A lot of global investors are going beyond the traditional ROI and are looking for sustainable and ethical investment opportunities. Increasingly, number of board members are now getting involved in formulating strategies that are resilient to the changes in the ESG environment. And this is trickling down in the form of various policies and initiatives that are sustainability driven. In fact, a lot of Indian companies are carving out a separate designation for the CSO, the Chief Sustainability Officer. As we know, CSR is the foundation upon which ESG has been built. In fact, ESG metrics can be used to refine CSR initiatives, ensuring that companies are focusing on the most impactful actions. A lot many sustainability initiatives like lowering carbon footprint, lowering energy intensity, etc., have a direct correlation with the operating cost, which in turn leads to operating efficiency for the organization. Now let us understand what does an all-inclusive ESG approach actually needs. Firstly, the focus of the organization should not only be on the short-term advantages, but on the long-term sustainability of the organization. Most importantly, this requires a disciplined integration of ESG principles into your strategy and risk management so that it trickles down to the various departments and all the stakeholders of the organization. Companies need to adopt environmental and social stewardship and embed sustainability across their value chain activities, particularly in the supply chain, as this is often considered as an elephant in the room, and companies usually find it most difficult to decarbonize. This approach also requires a critical focus on climate change mitigation and adaptation. Now, let us see if the Indian corporates are doing enough and are they going simply beyond compliance. There are knowledge gaps and limited awareness about sustainability. This is more so at the board level and senior management level. And as we saw in the previous slides, there's a dearth of environment and social related expertise at the leadership level. And this often leads to missing ESG driven strategic thinking by the board. Most organizations have a very short sighted view on the direct tangible benefits and are ignorant about the long term benefits of adoption of the best ESG practices. And this principally stems from the cost that they associate with the implementation of these practices. We have also observed that there is a very limited engagement with the various stakeholders on sustainability issue. Now, unless there's a constant and meaningful engagement with such stakeholders, organizations will not be able to identify the deeply rooted ESG concerns across their value chain. Now, let us see what can be done to ensure a meaningful participation by the corporates. Firstly, the need of the hour, which we all are cognizant of, is a India-specific taxonomy. Now, this is needed to provide a clear framework classifying sustainable activities and combating greenwashing. Once we have a definition of credible sustainable activities, this can be used to incentivize green activities by the government in the form of reduced cost of capital. The barriers to access blended finance also needs to be addressed. These primarily include increasing awareness about blended finance and facilitating access to concessional debt and equity. To enable a wider adoption of sustainability-linked products, the regulators need to introduce gremium into such products. Besides this, the government needs to create an entire ecosystem for fostering technological innovation, including climate tech, climate adaptation, etc. Only if all these are executed in a very collaborative manner can India achieve net zero by 2070. That was about the presentation from our end. I hope I was able to put together the pieces of ESG puzzle for you. Towards the end, I would just like to quote Mr. Jamshedji Tata, who has said that in a free enterprise, the community is not just another stakeholder in business, but in fact, it's the very purpose of its existence. Thank you. Over to you, Mamta.
Thank you, Hiba. Attendees are requested to key in their questions, which we will take up after our panel discussion. Now, may I invite Rohit Inamdar to take over the session, please. Rohit Inamdar is the Chief Executive Officer of CareEdge ESG Ratings Limited. With almost 3 decades of experience across premier credit rating agencies, he has led leadership positions in corporate, structured finance, public finance, infrastructure, and financial sector ratings. As a seasoned member of the rating committees for over 20 years, Rohit had often chaired key meetings, leveraging his deep industry knowledge and strategic insights. Over to you, Rohit.
Yeah, thank you, Mamta, and many thanks, Hiba, for setting the context through this sharp and concise presentation. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all the participants. Today we have a diverse panel of eminent industry experts who have devoted a considerable amount of time and energy to this evolving area of ESG and sustainability. We have with us Dr. Mukund Rajan, who is chairman of Ecube Investment Services Advisors. Ecube focuses on environmental, social, and governance issues and supports ESG and climate transition of Indian companies. Dr. Rajan is also on the Environment Committee of FICCI. To give us a corporate perspective, we have Mr. Prabodha Acharya, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at JSW Group, and he has experience of almost 3 decades in the areas of climate change, environment management, sustainability, assurance management, and ESG. We also have Mr. Manoj Kumar, who will give us deep insights on climate risk management. He is a seasoned banker who has been with ICICI Bank for more than 25 years. He is the head of ESG and CSR at ICICI Bank. This is a very brief introduction of our panelists. I will elaborate on their background and achievements one by one as we delve deeper into the panel discussion. So for the panel discussion, I have a couple of prepared questions for each panelist, following which we can take questions from the participants. You can keep putting up your questions in the chat box in the meantime. So before we get into panel discussions, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all the participants on behalf of CareEdge ESG. Now let me turn to Dr. Rajan. Dr. Rajan and Ecube Investment Advisors focus on ESG issues and support ESG and climate transition of Indian companies. Prior to Ecube's, Dr. Rajan was with Tata Group for over 2 decades, where he held a number of senior executive positions. He also serves as a mentor of the Environment and Climate Change Committee of FICCI. He is a member of ESG Advisory Committee set up by SEBI. He is an accomplished author, having published 4 books so far. His books delve into corporate ethics, sustainability, and leadership within the Indian business landscape. In fact, during the COVID pandemic, when I was twiddling my thumbs, he published 2 books. One book called Outlast, How ESG Can Benefit Your Businesses, which he co-authored with Dr. Rajiv Kumar. And another one called Tata's Leadership Experiment, the story of the Tata Administrative Services, which was published in 2022. Welcome to the panel, Dr. Rajan.
Thank you, Rohit.
Dr. Rajan, based on our interactions with the Indian corporates over the last 1 year, what we have understood is that most of the corporates treat ESG and sustainability as a checkbox or a tick box exercise. Only a handful of them seem to have embraced sustainability in true spirit or substance, and they have integrated it into their overall organizational strategy. But these are few companies. In fact, I've heard some people in the senior management mentioning sarcastically that BRSR reporting is our annual team building exercise. So what do you think is needed to change this perception? Do you think the organizational leadership or regulators can help in stimulating the corporates to look at ESG in its essence rather than its form?
Sure. So I think some part of the answer to that question has already been presented by Hiba. I think there is actually, despite the skepticism, there is actually a lot of good work that is taking place in the Indian corporate world. For instance, the point she made that in your analysis, of, I think, 100 odd companies. You found that 88% already had an ESG and sustainability committee of one form or another. So clearly, this is becoming something that has got elevated to the level of boards, certainly in many of the large corporates in India. Perhaps as you scale down and start looking at the mid market, maybe the impact is a little less. But I think many of the large companies in India, including those who've got good exposure overseas, they have, I think, embraced this agenda quite well, in my opinion. Data points, including from some of your competitors, for instance, MSCI, which looks at international ESG ratings, the number of companies rated from India that qualify as A or above has actually increased from, I think, 23% of the pool to 32% over the last 5 years on a much larger pool. So it shows that not only are they embracing this, but they're also being rated quite well for their efforts. I think the things that the best companies do better than most of the others, apart from elevating the whole conversation to the board and embedding it in their strategy, I think they ensure that the senior leadership is tasked to deliver. And there are key performance indicators on ESG that are linked actually to the compensation of CEOs. You're starting to see that happen, I think, across a range of companies in India. He also spoke about the fact that many of these companies are now appointing chief sustainability officers. So that's becoming a designation that's becoming quite common in many of the large companies. So I think across the spectrum, we are seeing that there is good efforts being made. Obviously, the BRSR as a compliance requirement is something that pushed the agenda initially. But I think now the best companies see that not only does the focus on this issue alert you to potential risks in your strategy execution that lie ahead, which you need to deal with, but it also opens up the possibility of many opportunities which can help to maybe increase your top line, open up new markets for you. So I think the best companies are realizing the benefits of that and therefore also being rewarded in the stock markets. You asked about what perhaps regulators might also do to push the agenda. In India, I think, again, a lot of the initial compliance starts with the need to be responsive to regulatory requirements. The NBRSR is a good case in point. But I think the regulators also are now slowly but surely pushing the envelope forward. And I think there are broadly sort of three ways in which I see this happening in India. The first is, of course, regulatory mandate. So if you look at, for instance, the BRSR itself, the disclosure requirements, including the core BRSR disclosure requirements of top 150 companies, those are quite specific and prescriptive. There are ways in which regulators can push the envelope further in this regard. So if you think, for instance, about potentially something like the green taxonomy, which Hiba mentioned, if the Ministry of Finance is able to articulate that, and a regulator like the public banks regulator, the RBI, were to include green lending across the green taxonomy as part of priority sector lending, that would be one way of pushing the agenda forward and ensuring that more of these green activities, ESG-friendly activities, get supported by the lending community. So one part of it is the mandates. And I think there is enough activity, setting standards, extended producer responsibility rules, all of that have fallen into place. The second aspect, I would say, is incentives and potentially subsidies. We've seen this coming from the central government. We've seen this coming from state governments across spaces like electric vehicles, energy efficiency, the kind of facilities that SIDBI provides to mid-market and small and medium enterprises. A lot of support that is being extended there. One of the spaces that Hiba again talked about was in carbon credits trading. That could provide incentives for companies that are generating carbon credits and able to then monetize those and trade those. So that would be, again, a space where I think all of us would like to see a bit more push coming from the regulator this year. The third is simply in terms of making information available to the market and allowing stakeholders then to run with that information and act on their instincts, whether it is investors using the BRSR information or it is customers who are using the information that comes out of product labeling that is addressed by people like the Bureau of Indian Standards and so on. On the food safety side, the FSSAI, the Food Safety and Standards Authority, has done some good work in identifying the kinds of labels that food products need to have. And customers are making choices based on the information that gets provided. And again, this is a space that you could take forward. So for instance, some of the rules that have now come out from the Central Consumer Protection Authority on the way in which companies should try and avoid greenwashing, the kind of authentic information that should be provided. We haven't yet perhaps got to the stage of penalizing entities that provide false, wrong, unauthenticated information, but we'll get there soon enough. And I think all the bases are now in place for really this agenda to be moved forward. So I'm actually quite bullish on the fact that both companies are beginning to take this agenda quite seriously, and the regulators are offering full support. And of course, there are many spaces where more could be done to extend this agenda more quickly and ensure that adoption is sincere by the corporate world.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. It's good to know, and that you are optimistic in this area, and also the fact that the government initiatives are also being supported. Government has also been supportive through various initiatives. Large corporates have taken the first step in treading down this ESG and sustainability path. I'm sure the smaller entities, which Hiba showed, which are currently just looking at it as a tick box exercise, probably will start following the example set by larger entities. Thank you for that very comprehensive and well-rounded explanation. Let me move to Mr. Acharya. Mr. Acharya, in his current role as Chief Sustainability Officer at JSW Group, he partners with CEOs, senior executives, and functional heads across the entire group to develop and drive ESG and sustainability strategy for its group companies. In addition to his leadership role at JSW, he has contributed to sustainability as either a chairman or vice chairman or member of various committees on climate change, environment, sustainability across different industry bodies like World Steel, Indian Steel Association, CII, FICCI, ICICI, ASSOCHAM, and many more. So under his leadership, sustainability has been integrated within the business strategy at JSW Steel. Recently, JSW Steel has been recognized by World Steel Association as a Steel Sustainability Champion, I think for the 7th year in a row from 2019 to 2025. Congratulations, Mr. Acharya, and welcome to the panel. I have now a two-part question for you. First and foremost, in our experience, many companies are looking at ESG as an additional cost with no commensurate, immediate, or direct benefits. They often wonder how being sustainable will help them get more funding at reduced costs. And the second part of the question is, what has been your experience? Did you feel similar challenges? Did you face similar challenges while implementing ESG at JSW Group? And how has JSW Group been able to successfully embed ESG into its strategic thinking and organizational culture?
Thank you very much, Rohitji, first of all, for your generous introductions. Good afternoon to all the listeners. Thank you to CareEdge for inviting me to part of this excellent discussions, having eminent co-panelists. Before I delve into answering your two direct questions, first let me, because while I'm listening from the beginning, I see three terms or two terms at least being used very synonymously. And your question also included those two terms. One is ESG, another is sustainability. Generally, we all perceive both are same, but I think there is a distinction between these two terms, and we need to be careful how we address those and drive those in the organizational context. Because your question is for the organizational context, I thought to clarify, it's my view. The first of all, ESG, if you see it as a term, it has gained momentum after COVID. The reason because ESG is primarily investor driven, and mostly investors and rating agency use this word. Why? Because this is to manage the risk that could impact the financial performance of the company. So if you are an investor, if I am an investor, I will not only see whether the company is able to manage the risk related to their operations, but also related to environmental, social, and governance risk. So this perspective is mostly investor perspective when we talk about ESG. For example, governance is a fundamental. It is existing with the organizations from the beginning. Without that, you cannot run the organizations. CSR, which is being practiced since long, and India has mandated the requirement. It's already there, which takes care of the communities aspects. So perspective becomes investment perspective when we talk about ESG. But when it comes to sustainability, it is actually all the stakeholders' perspective, including customers, including regulator, including the voiceless stakeholders like environment, marginalized society. And there, the approach becomes being responsible, finding growth opportunity, and creating that positive impact. So therefore, there is a subtle but clear distinction. ESG is a measurement at the end. For example, in JSW, what we do, we review the sustainability and we have a sustainability committee, but the ESG is being reviewed by the risk committee to understand if there is ESG related risk that need to be addressed. So there is a subtle difference. So with that, my answer will be to first part of your question, whether it is a cost or whether it is opportunity. I take this question as whether sustainability is a cost or sustainability is an opportunity. We drive sustainability and opportunity, because if you think it's and any money spent has to be treated as an investment rather than the cost. Because when cost comes, when it is compliance requirement, it is mandated. And I think Mukund Saab already has stated the compliance requirement has pushed organizations towards meeting this requirement, because that's the external force. So if there is a compliance requirement, you would do. Like BRSR is a reporting compliance requirement, we need to do, and that no question should be asked. But before reporting, you have to put some processes in place, and therefore you can report. So if I have to drive sustainability and embed in the business practices, we look at what are the opportunity existing to become more efficient, to become more responsible, and address those significant risk trends which can impact the business in the long term. Let me give examples. See, for example, being efficient is profitable. In JSW, we understand that we have given a commitment to have a net zero by 2050 or reduce our emission intensity by 2030. 42% we have given commitment. But if you have to drive that point inside the business, what we have started a movement, we called it internally called SEED, Sustainable Energy, Environment and Decarbonization. This is nothing but empowering each and everybody who is owning an asset and running an asset to maximize the output with the less input. In the process, what happens, you reduce your emissions, but you also save cost and make money out of it. So that's one example. Second example, I can talk about energy efficiency programs. These are good for environment, but good for business to make money. There is a clear directly link of opportunities. So I have many examples, using because we are from manufacturing sector, specifically in the steel, what happens that when you make steel, you also produce undesirable impacts, whether it is a solid waste, whether it is a liquid waste, whether it is a gaseous waste. So do you want to treat this as a waste, or you want to treat this as a byproduct and find an opportunity to reuse and sell it as a product? Let me give an example in that. When we produce steel, specifically in the iron making process, that's called blast furnace, we produce a lot of slags. Even I remember when I started my career 30 years before, near each steel plant in India, you'll find huge hills. Those are all slags who are getting accumulated. It has a negative impact on the environment, but it has a negative impact on the cost. What we did, we started using them to cement making. In JSW, we created JSW Cement as a business. So they are using the slag and making cement, creating value out of that. So in the process, you are managing an environmental issue, creating a value, creating a business out of it. And in the process, what we have created? We have created a clean, green cement. Our JSW Cement has the least carbon footprint in the world among all the cement plants. That is how we look at. So, so to answer your first part of question and also to the second part of question, to drive sustainability integrate with the business practices, you need to find opportunities. How you create value out of managing an issue which could impact negatively, whether it is to environment or whether it is to society or whether it is to regulations. So that should be the approach. And that in my experience in last 30 years in this field, I have seen this approach works because business loves opportunities. Although we need to manage the risk. And that is why possibly ESG and sustainability are being used synonymously nowadays. But that's a subtle difference.
Yeah.
But if you have to perform, because at the end, so Rohitji, like organization like CareEdge, you will rate the ESG performance. You are not going to rate the sustainability performance, right? So if I have to perform better in your ESG rating, I have to have a better sustainable management systems in place to drive business benefit. That will also ensure my risk are managed and I get a ESG ratings as well. So that investors like Manish is happy.
Yeah.
So this is how it has to be driven is my experience.
Thank you so much, Mr. Acharya, for that wonderful explanation, for highlighting the subtle differences between ESG and sustainability, which often gets used alternatively, across the industry. But thank you for that. You also highlighted that the difference between cost and investment, that's a mindset, how you look at cost versus whether you treat it as a cost or you look at it as an investment. And then you also stated that there are benefits. You are looking at sustainability from the benefit or opportunity point of view, and you've explained it so well with 2-3 examples. Thank you for that response. Now I think it's time we understood a banker's perspective. After all, if as a country we are serious about achieving our Panchamrit or NDC goals, which Hiba mentioned by 2030, then eventually which will lead into net zero by 2070, then we need to green our financial system. Without a push from the banking sector, it will not be feasible to attain our nationally determined climate goals. So therefore, to get bankers' perspective, we can turn to Mr. Manish Kumar, who is the head of ESG and CSR at ICICI Bank. Mr. Kumar is seasoned banker and has diverse banking experience in the areas of loan syndication, risk management, and climate change across multiple geographies like Southeast Asia, UK, Middle East, and Europe. In addition to what he's doing in India, he's looked at these geographies as well. Currently, he leads ICICI Bank's efforts on stakeholder engagement on ESG metrics, bank's oversight on ESG goals. He is also responsible for managing ICICI Bank's action plans towards achieving ESG goals. Moreover, he's been a regular panelist in forums on ESG, sustainability, climate risk, CSR, UN SDGs, and so on. Thank you, Mr. Kumar, for being on the panel. A very warm welcome to you as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Kumar, what are your thoughts on RBI's draft disclosure framework on climate-related financial risks, which came out in February last year? While the final framework is still awaited, we understand that there could be several data-related challenges, especially in the areas of risk quantification and scenario analysis for the banking sector. You think our banking sector is prepared for these climate-related disclosures and actions?
Thank you, Rohit. And I again thank CareEdge to invite me to be a panelist here along with Mukund and Prabodha. It's really a privilege to share the dais with these two gentlemen. See, with regard to RBI's disclosure framework, it is a very positive move by the regulator for the banking sector. I think SEBI took the lead by requiring companies, the top 1,000 listed companies, to publish the BRSR, and it was a sector agnostic kind of a disclosure requirement. RBI, being the prudential regulator for the financial sector, is looking at it from a risk lens, and I think it is adding a different dimension to the entire disclosure requirement. The good news is that RBI has taken into account the various reporting frameworks internationally, like the TCFD disclosure, which is the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, which was the first one to come up with a framework for disclosures, which had four pillars around governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. RBI has actually followed a similar pattern. They have looked at it from a banking sector perspective. And I think by coming up with their draft disclosure, they have nudged the financial sector on what they can do internally on these four pillars. Uh, I think as a regulator, they have engaged with the industry. They have realized that there are different challenges in terms of the size of operations of various banks, in terms of the reach of various banks, in terms of data availability, and also in terms of the standard data which can be used for this particular disclosure. I think that is the reason why RBI is going slow in really coming out with the final requirement. They are assessing the preparedness of the banking sector. And I would say to the part of your second question, how the banking sector is prepared, there is a lot of traction which is happening. The RBI has been focusing on capacity building. The RBI has really taken the lead to get a lot of experts, not only within India, but from outside India. They do hold sessions to really explain the concepts. They really guide the banking sector on what is the requirement. They also engage with the organizations at various levels, including the board. They want the board to really understand, how the climate-related risk can impact financial performance. I think RBI is really working on the softer aspects before they can really come up with the final disclosure requirement. Mind you, this is a disclosure requirement. It will drive a lot of action because ultimately what will get reported is only what activity is performed. So right now, the way RBI is looking at it is they are nudging the banks to perform the activity so that they can be better prepared to make the disclosure. Over to you, Rohit.
Yeah. Thanks, Manish. I think at this stage, I'll reverse the order for our panelists because for you, I have a follow-on question, which is how has ICICI Bank kick-started its this process of estimating and mitigating climate risk? What challenges have you faced in its implementation? I'm sure the implementation is ongoing, but so far, what are the challenges you have faced when it comes to climate risk mitigation?
We started this process way back, I would say, in 2019 when we adopted the GRI framework. Our integrated report actually, is aligned to the GRI requirements. And we published our first ESG report in 2021. That is where we started looking at various international reporting requirements. And that really, I would say, was the start of the process for us. Again, as my panelists have already mentioned, and it's known, there was a lot of investor push after COVID, which actually triggered actions being taken in India, of course, followed by the government's announcement of NDCs and the policy initiatives that they have been taking, which has facilitated a lot of action that we are taking. So the entire process started with the reporting requirements, with engagement with investors, with engagement with the rating agencies like MSCI, DJSI, Sustainalytics to really understand the concepts, to understand how these parameters are really rated, how these parameters are really assessed, and the importance of the parameters per se, inter se. So that is how we started the process. We tried to engage which would be the various stakeholders which need to get involved in this particular process. And I think the BRSR has really helped put the process in a formal manner within the organization. So now that we understand what are the reporting requirements from a BRSR perspective, we have clearly mapped each of the reporting requirements to a stakeholder. And therefore, the responsibility now is actually, organization wide. So I think you mentioned in the beginning that somebody really mentioned that this is an annual meeting which happens internally within the organization. Actually, it is similar as far as BRSR is concerned. But ultimately, what we are doing is we are seeking data. And data and information is something that those various individuals or parts of the organizations have done in the area of sustainability. So the entire focus is on responsible business behavior. It's about responsible business action and reporting that in a manner which is acceptable to a stakeholder, to a reader of the BRSR. So while you mentioned these are ongoing challenges because things are evolving, because say for example the regulations are not very clear, because India is still working on its taxonomy, but there is a lot of action which is happening. There is a lot of information which can be produced, which can demonstrate responsible behavior. So I think it will be an ongoing exercise.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kumar, for that. Let's stay on this theme of NDC and net zero targets. We realize that if we have to achieve those, then Indian corporates will have to play a major role in fulfilling their commitments and achieving nation's goals and targets. How can Indian corporates support these national commitments? How should the government or regulators encourage Indian corporates to follow this path of sustainability and environment protection? Is a question I would like to pose to you, Mr. Acharya.
No, thank you, Rohit, for that question. In fact, it's a very welcome step when our Prime Minister announced our net zero target in COP26 at Glasgow. But we all understand, as a nation, we cannot achieve some commitment without our corporates and industries actively participating. Because ultimately, the major large portion of emissions is still contributed by the corporates through their manufacturing and service actions, right? So each and every corporate has to play an important role. And in that case, I am really happy to state Indian corporate are responding well. If you see majority of our, if you see the hard to abate sectors where we know reducing emission is difficult because the way the product is made, for example, steel or cement or shipping or aviation or the chemical processes, it's difficult. But in that case, if you see the leading steel industries, they have taken a commitment to achieve their net zero 25 years before India achieves its commitment. You see the case of Tata Steel, 2045, JSW Steel, 2050, JSPL, 2047. So corporates are really taking this call and actions and becoming very ambitious. So once you set your ambitions, I'm sure the commitment, the actions will follow the commitment and ambitions. I always give example like how US President Kennedy announced that I'll put a man on the moon. There we were not knowing how it would be done, but it has done. Similarly, when we are putting our ambitious targets in place, commitment in the public disclosure, actions are following. I know for sure from our group perspective, each and every business has committed to achieve net zero 20 years before India achieved the commitment. And that will be a significant contribution to India achieving its own commitment. There is no regulatory requirement currently, at least in place, to limit those emissions or achieve a net zero target. This is voluntary, but still corporates are taking actions. Government supporting them. I know for sure in the steel sector, I can talk about it. The Ministry of Steel and the steel sector are jointly working on and then published a report recently on how to green the steel sector in India. I think Hiba presented that how India has taken a lead in defining what a green product is. So I think a lot of actions are happening. But I will also agree with Mr. Rajan, Mukund Rajan, talking about how corporate also need support in bringing in new technology, and if new technologies are often not financially viable, therefore we need to look for appropriate financing vehicles to make those quickly getting on ground and getting to the scale. So important is how quickly we can scale it If you look at in the renewable energy, there are two, three things that happened very well in India. First of all, India mandating a uptake of renewable energy. At that point of time, I remember at least 25, 30 years before, the renewable energy cost was significantly high. But see what has happened. The finances came, the technology came, and Indian corporate responded by scaling it up. If I give an example, like in our group, where I joined 5 years before, our JSW Energy, which is an energy generating and supplying company, we are having 70% thermal and 30% renewable. Now in 5 years, if you see, we are 70% renewable, 30% thermal. So there are enough examples that corporates are acting, taking actions and taking this voluntary actions seriously and integrating in the business practices. But one thing I'll put a caveat here, and I'll go back to where I started. All action in any business, in any corporate, has to be financially sustainable before being actually taking those transitions and commitment into action to be good. So question is how quickly we can make that happen. And that is where there is a good symbiosis between government actions and private actions. It needs further, I think more could be done, but I'm very optimistic that it will be done. And I'm very positive that India as a country, we should be able to meet what we have committed in the global scale.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Acharya. You are exuding with a lot of optimism, and at the same time, you are also saying that how we should be, looking at this problem as an opportunity, how we can make a sustainable, a sustainability outcome financially more viable, so that it sticks and stays, and we are able to achieve those goals. Moving to Dr. Rajan. Dr. Rajan, so far our discussion has been focused on large corporates and banking sector. But a large chunk of our manufacturing GDP as well as employment comes from small and medium enterprises. In the context of value chain also, SMEs play a very pivotal role. So are Indian SMEs equipped to embark on this sustainability journey, or is it too early for them? And what can government or regulators or the banking sector do to encourage SMEs towards ESG adoption?
Sure.
After all, it's a big piece in the whole scheme of things.
Yeah. No, you're quite right. They're quite pivotal to how the country can move forward. Most estimates will suggest between 30 and 40% of the GDP is ultimately created by these SMEs. And again, depending on which estimates you look at, several tens of millions of all of these put together, including the micro, small, and medium enterprises. I think bottom line, unlike the large corporates, which we have been talking a lot about, which have awareness about trends overseas, which are probably exporting to markets where standards are quite high, and which have a clear understanding of how they need to make capital allocations to stay competitive with global peers. The smaller medium enterprises, for the most part, tend to lack perhaps the most current information on what are the new regulations coming down the pipe. They may not have access to global best practices. They may not know what are the best new technologies that are available that they could deploy. And very clearly, there is a big issue in terms of access to finance that they often struggle with. So there is really a challenge that the SME sector does face that needs to be addressed. And I think the government is seized of it and is trying to do its bit to support them.
Progress.
Look at SME partners who accounted for 2% or more of their sale or purchase value. Earlier, the sense was it would probably bring in its fold many more SMEs, and therefore there would be a requirement to comply with some of the reporting requirements of the large corporates to demand in order for them to then prepare their BRSA reports. And I think SEBI was understanding that many of the SMEs are not yet ready and therefore need to be given time. So there's a calibrated approach in expecting them to come up to speed, for instance, on compliance requirements, audit requirements, and so on. I think on the access to technology and infrastructure, some efforts have been made to try and get the SMEs to look at concepts where perhaps they can aggregate their demand and get economies of scale and being able to then deploy solutions. SIDBI has done a few very interesting pilots in clusters of SMEs where they've been able to deploy common infrastructure from common effluent treatment plants to common energy sources, rooftop solar or ground-based solar deployments. I think those are ways in which you can share risk across a range of partners who are participating in this economic activity. I would like to see a situation where the large corporates also perhaps can provide support, particularly to the banking system, to extend concessional finance to the SME sector. Large corporates have a very clear idea about the performance and the aptitude to really change of their SMEs in their value chains. And if a bunch of large corporates in the hard-to-abate sectors got together and were able to provide information on the performance of their SME partners and perhaps some amount of funding that could act as a guarantee in partnership with the government, and that guarantee scheme could be extended to the large banks to then support these SMEs in their financing needs, I think that could also go a long way in helping these more forward-looking SMEs to adopt new technologies that may be required for them to become more compliant or to address requirements of higher standards in other markets that India may be exporting to. So I think a range of initiatives will be required to support the SMEs to scale up. The good news is it's beginning to happen. There are some very successful pilots, as I mentioned, by players like SIDBI, but much more will need to be done very quickly so that large part of the economic activity in India, which is controlled by SMEs, is really falling into lockstep with the expectations of other stakeholders and the regulatory requirements.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. Suddenly, the time seems to be moving very rapidly. Let me see if I can squeeze in a couple of questions from the audience here. I will read out the questions. There are a few questions. I will pick a couple of questions only because we don't have that much time left now. So the first question is, does BRSR require large companies to conduct a scenario analysis in alignment with IEA or NGFS scenarios and publish the outcome in terms of risks and opportunities posed by each of these scenarios? And what is the engagement landscape of asset owners and asset managers with investee companies for disclosure of climate emission data and integration of ESG factors into strategic decisions? Since this question is addressed to large companies, Mr. Acharya, your comments on this, whether you are required to conduct scenario analysis in alignment with IEA or NGFS scenarios?
See, we are doing, because again, for the large corporate, it's very important to understand what are the opportunity and what are the risk. So all our business, we are doing scenario analysis and then making a plan to address the risk and plan to optimize the opportunities. But whether it is a requirement in the BRSR or not, I don't think it is an explicit requirement of scenario analysis in the BRSR. But whether organizations should do, yes, they should do. That will be my answer. And as far as our experience is concerned, in all our business we have done, even we have gone to, we are currently doing to the extent that how do we integrate that to our financials, that what is the impact of our actions and impact of our inactions in the financial terms, because that is something everybody understands. I have seen money is something that everybody understands.
Right. That's true.
So all this risk and opportunity has to be converted ultimately to the financial term. And then, looking at the risk and opportunity, it will be easy for the decision maker to take a decision.
Okay. There is one more question related to SMEs. Dr. Rajan, the question is very short. It says, what more support do SMEs need in the near term? Well, you have elaborated at length on this already, but if you have maybe one or two pointers on this.
These days, so I talked briefly about access to infrastructure, technology, and financing, and obviously access to awareness building programs around best practices and what's coming down the pipe. But one of the maybe more specific suggestions one could also make is we're hearing so much about the impact of artificial intelligence and digital technology in today's world. Even with GST implementation, something as straightforward as that, we've seen many SMEs have initially struggled with the ability to comply, even importing the right IT systems and so on. So I suspect with the advent of AI, perhaps one part of the focus in supporting SMEs in the immediate short term would be in trying to create templatized tools that SMEs could get access to, which may be government or industry or public-private partnership between government and industry could make available these tools on a concessional basis or even free of cost to SMEs to be able to quickly understand how to measure key sustainability indicators, how to see what are the comparable performance benchmarks, both in the Indian market and other markets, to look at what are some of the correlations between their ability to be efficient producers of product, for instance, and the kind of measurements that they are noticing in their operations. I think providing all of that information at least gets them past first base and makes it easier for them to then start looking for the specific technology inputs or skilled manpower they might require for understanding of best practices to really then scale up faster. So I think that could be one specific suggestion on top of what I spoke about earlier on access to technology, best practices, and financing.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. We are completely out of time. There are several questions still left to be unanswered. But with your permission, I'll squeeze in just one more question. It's from an HR professional who wants to know what could be some important levers that the person can manage while driving the organization towards ESG practices. Mr. Acharya, you want to take that question?
Sorry, the question is how we can motivate the people to...
The person is saying, as an HR professional, I want to know what could be some important levers that I can use while driving the organization towards ESG practices.
Yeah, a couple of things I can tell from my experience how we are doing. So first of all, see, there are compliance requirements and HR's involvement is essential when you drive a majority part of the social aspect, specifically employee related issues, labor related issues. So those, it's a compliance requirement. So you can get your involvement very quickly telling that this is something which is to be done. The second thing is changing the mindset, awareness change, behavioral changes. That is something people can do. It depends on the type of the organizations. Possibly you can curate opportunities, because I told I love opportunities. So whatever you do, you find some opportunity that can motivate the people fast. Whatever your intention might be to reduce your water consumption. Your intention can be reduce your resource consumption. Your intention can be reduce your emissions. But you have to see, when you talk to the other people, you see what interests him, what will motivate him. Instead of telling what we want, we need to tell the conversation what they want, and can I do some program where they will be motivated to do and get some benefit. See, everybody asks at the end, what is in there for me? So my strategy has been to speak the language of the people to whom you speak. If I talk to a finance person, my language will be different. If I talk to a production person, my language will be different. So if HR is also speaking to different sections of your organization, you need to talk to their language, but with the objective in your mind, what you want to drive the change. So message is, speak the language of the people to whom you are speaking to.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Acharya. I think I will now not take any more questions because we are completely out of time. So on behalf of CareEdge ESG, I would like to thank all the panelists for their well-rounded perspectives on ESG and sustainability. I would also like to thank audience for their participation and patience. Let me now hand this over to Mamta for closing remarks.
Thank you, Rohit, for moderating the session, and Hiba for your presentation. Once again, we thank all our guest speakers for their insightful views. It was a privilege to host you. And lastly, thank you to all the participants for taking the time out and being a part of this CareEdge webinar. For any further queries, feedback, or suggestions, please write to us in the feedback mail. Goodbye for now. Requesting the tech team to kindly log off.
Thank you.
Thank you.